Hello and welcome everyone back to another episode of the Publisher Lab. I'm Tyler Bishop, joined alongside me Whitney Wright. Whitney, last week we got into a lot of the topics of digital news and publishing, but they were all kind of one topic, and normally we bounce around a little bit, but yeah, I have a feeling that it's going to be a familiar topic for a while now.
Yeah, I think it's going to be hard not to talk about it every week, at least a little bit. Again, something big happened this past week that we need to talk about, obviously. So we do have one topic not related to that, which we'll talk about first, but then we'll get into what we're talking ChatGPT.
And we're just beating around that AI bush of the ChatGPT, OpenAI, I guess, explosion that's been going on here recently. We talked last week about the average users to 100 million being the fastest of anything. You can look at Instagram or TikTok, and OpenAI's ChatGPT has exceeded the speed at which both of them got to 100 million users.
Mm-hmm.
And then we even got some news right before we started the podcast that Google has made a little bit of about face as it relates to their stance on sort of AI generated content. So yeah, let's get right into it.
Okay, well, like I said, we're going to first talk about something other than that, since we'll probably be focusing on that.
Yeah, give you guys a break.
Yeah, exactly. There's some other stuff happening in digital publishing as well. So this is an article from DigiDay. It's about clickbait ads and protecting their audiences. Ad quality is getting harder and harder to control in programmatic advertising. Clickbait is, it's easier for offensive or misleading ads to appear on sites. And there was research by GeoEdge and DigiDay that 76% of publishers reported that user experience on their site has been affected by ad quality challenges, and 66% reported that it negatively impacted their revenue, which is not surprising. This has been a thing for a while, but apparently it's getting worse. And approximately 2/3 of security issues detected by GeoEdge are clickbait scams with deceptive creative rather than ads with malicious code. And so since there's no universal standard for what's like a good-looking ad and a bad-looking ad, it's all up to publishers. Mm-hmm. But it's important to block clickbait on the pre-impression level, but that's difficult, and not all technology is capable of doing it.
Yeah, and this is a really complicated problem because I think first we have to distinguish two things, which is one, ads that people don't like the way they look, or they just think that they are advertising a product that is like low quality or something that they personally might not want to be associated with, which is those things are all within the realm of sort of, somebody has money that they want to spend to buy your product, which is space for ads. So you can choose to not sell it, but you might have to accept a lower price. Mm-hmm. So that is just the way that it is, outside of things that are like categorically like banned by ad policy guidelines and things like that. And then you have sort of these like malicious and policy breach type of ads. So the malicious ones are the ones where it's like you click on a website and then all of a sudden it's like your Mac has been infected by a virus. Mm-hmm. It's like what they call these like malicious redirects. And then you also have people that basically find ways to kind of skirt around ad policies and will run a campaign for a little while for something, that's, obscene or, whatever. And so with those things in mind, the reason why ads in of themselves are really hard to block at that level, because you would think like if somebody's doing a malicious redirect type campaign and it's happening to, I get them on ESPN, I get them on like large brand publishers that have teams of people that spend time on this. And the reason is because AdX, Google's inventory for campaigns, they go into there, but then you have what they call these DSPs. And these DSPs and these SSPs all have data. So if you're trying to target a campaign, you might work with third party A, and they may run a campaign with Rubicon, but that same campaign is in 5 other SSPs and 5 other DSPs. And so when you actually see the ad, you don't really, it's actually maybe coming from Google, but it's being resold through one of 10 parties in this SSP line or one of maybe 24 parties in this DSP line. So at the end of the day, it's like you can't just block Google ads, right? So then you've got to figure out which DSP or SSP is running it, and then it might be running in all of them, mm-hmm. or it might be running in just one. And tracing that down is really, really difficult, and there's no automated way to be able to do it. And so it's been a plague on the industry for a long time, and there are better services and systems than others at kind of identifying that, but none of them are perfect, and none of them will claim to be either, I don't think.
Right, and I think beyond, malicious ads and malicious code, infecting your Mac, it affects users' experience, which then affects your ad revenue, and then advertisers, like higher quality advertisers, aren't going to want to advertise with you. And so, beyond just like sending someone to a bad website, it's like affecting people's like revenue and income and just the overall usability of their site. So what are some, I guess, like technologies that you were talking about that are good at sussing this out, or like what can publishers do to help avoid clickbait?
Yeah, there's one, I think it might be called Lightning. I know that some of our RevOps and AdOps people here at our office really like that one. But Confiant is one that's been around for a long time that generally does a pretty good job in my experience. However, all those systems and tools are really expensive. And so if you're not a publisher that's probably like working at a larger brand, or at least like a media house or something like that that's got the resources to afford something like that across multiple sites, it doesn't really make sense. And so the other things you can pretty much do are, whoever you're using to serve ads on your website, anytime you see one, just right click, copy, and then there should be a place somewhere inside of either the tools or systems, or even if you're using a service provider of some kind, you should be able to send them that URL, and at least they can stomp out that campaign on your site for then. And like, it stops that one, it doesn't stop any others. But that's like the fast, quick thing that you can do. The other thing that you can do is, if you are managing your own ad stack, or you've been able to kind of maybe identify where it's being served from, turn that party off, or whoever you're working with, find out and then ask them to turn that party off for you. And the problem with even just doing that is that ad network or header bidder or whoever it is that's in somebody's ad stack, that may be, they may be egregious offenders where they let a lot of those through, but more realistically, they're all sort of get caught at some point. So I would only do that in instances where it feels like it really is maybe one party more than another. And then the last thing to consider is, when we're not talking about malicious or redirect ads, I find this with independent publishers more often than anything else, but when you're on your own site, one of the things that happens is, if you browse around a lot, the indexes and the real-time bidding protocol are designed to base ad bidding off of historical data. So that historical data for you as a publisher is probably going to be, this is somebody that visits lots of pages, never clicks on anything, never buys anything. This is not a user I want to bid on. So generally what I find is, the more you're on your site, the more that you may see like what you think are lower quality ads, but the reality is, it's just because the good advertisers have dropped out of auctions with you, because they see you as a looky-loo almost, if that's a technical term.
I think it is, yes. How does ads.txt play into this?
Ads.txt was it was a bad idea to start with, in my opinion, but it's one of those things to where it's like, it's like saying there's, all these people keep walking through this area that we don't want them to walk through, so let's just put a cone up. And it's like people just walk right around the cone. And that's sort of what's happened here. So ads.txt was meant to prevent domain spoofing. So basically, somebody would, in the real-time bidding, they'd go to an SSP and say, I'm the New York Times. Somebody would buy ads in the New York Times, and it would actually redirect to one of these, like not the New York Times types of websites. So ads.txt basically says, like, I want to approve who's allowed to sell my inventory. So that's fine, but we talked just a second ago about how all the SSPs and DSPs, are vulnerable to these things anyways. So even having an ads.txt file that whitelists, the ones that you want to work with, doesn't stop the fact that some of them are going to let these things through anyways. So it's just become really this thing that's a headache for publishers to manage, and it offers it's snuffed out a strategy that no one is using now. Again, I guess if it goes away, the brand publishers might, people would go back to using that sort of like, hack for trying to get inventory through. But yeah, ads.txt is kind of a failure.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, there's not a lot of great solutions. All you can really do is kind of monitor your site and do your best, unless you said, you have some revenue to kind of throw at technology that can help you with this.
Yeah, I do think that a portion of this is it's never going to be perfect. And I think as individual publishers, you need to make sure that it's not something that's a greater problem for you than it is for others, but it's an industry problem. And I think the industry has no end of problems, this being a big one. But it's not one that publishers necessarily can improve on their own. It's really the people up the chain that have to do a better job. And I don't mean just one party. I mean, as the ecosystem, we have a very bad chain of custody when it comes to advertising.
Yeah. Well, on to the big topic. Microsoft Bing previews its new search engine with ChatGPT 3.5. This is only out for, it's not out for everyone. Users can chat with, ask questions, or even create content with the new AI-powered search engine. The new homepage, it basically pops up on Bing. It says, "Ask me anything," and then, from what I've seen, the results appear on the right side, kind of like the featured snippets might on Google. If you search Abraham Lincoln and it pops up on the side, Wikipedia or whatever. The results appear on the right side of the page. It includes annotations and site sources. And it can provide more real-time answers using Bing Index, and will be feedback links to let it know when the results aren't what you wanted. And then you can switch between search and chat. You can create content and get inspiration, rewrite code from one language to another. So yeah, they're testing it out. They're throwing it out there. It's a big thing happening right now. And our next topic, and we can just kind of get into it, is Google is throwing
Clap
out
back, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, okay, well, we have ours too, and they're kind of throwing it out there as well.
We have AI as well.
Yeah, exactly. They have Bard, which is powered by a lightweight version of Lambda. And it will be widely available in the coming weeks. It takes less computing power, is what they say, so it should be able to scale to more users. But yeah, they basically were like, well, Microsoft Bing has theirs out. We have to throw ours out right now too.
Yeah, it does. It definitely feels that way. They were very defensive on their earnings call, and I feel like it's kind of funny the Microsoft and Google thing here, because Google really Microsoft had their big launch this week, and Google kind of threw one together the next day, and it's like they do feel very defensive. And I think I'm gonna be kind, because they're a partner and I've worked with them for a long time, and the thing is I think that there's a sense of they've been working on this for so long, and by everything that I understand, and we have some engineers that have had a chance to play with it directly. The Lambda model is just as good as OpenAI's stuff, if not better in some categories. It's just that Google's kept it under wraps, and I think that they thought that they could spend even more time on this and get it just right, and that they could control sort of the release of how AI was introduced to the public slowly over time or something. And they drug their feet, and now this is the position that they're in. And who knows where things will go from here. But I will say this, and I'm interested if you got a chance to play with if Microsoft's new Bing chat. But this, in both cases, strikes me as a situation where everybody that's thinking about Google and Microsoft and their implementation of AI, I feel like what I'm looking at when I go to these things, and a lot of the others that are popping up that are trying to do the same thing, I'm looking at a mechanical horse. I'm not looking at a car.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we talked about this last week. There's still so much to be done with AI, and it's not a replacement for writing, and I think a lot of publishers are worried about that. But according to Microsoft, there are 10 billion search queries a day, but it is estimated that half go unanswered because people are using search for something it wasn't originally designed to do.
You weren't actually in the office probably 30 minutes ago whenever I was explaining this, so it's interesting that you bring that up, because I wasn't aware of that statistic, but I had said the same thing, which is, if you want to search something like, why does aluminum rust? It's like, you're not just curious about the state of aluminum. There's probably a reason why.
Right. Yeah, and I think that this is where AI can come in and kind of answer those more distinct questions, whereas search engines were originally for finding content, and that's what they're going to be continued to be used for. And I think that this is we've kind of talked about this before. This is like the new smartphone. This is like the new internet. Like this is the beginning of something like really important and big. It's going to change everything. But I don't think it has to be scary. I think it can be exciting.
It really does. I was thinking about it yesterday. It really does remind me of the early internet, because I remember when email came out, everybody was like, I remember somebody sent me like virtual flowers, and it's just a picture. I was like, it's just a picture of flowers, you know? But everybody was like, email. Oh my God.
Yeah.
You know, like we were so easily impressed then.
Yeah.
Like I send it to you and then like hit that send and receive button, and then it's like waiting. And it's like after a minute, it's like, ding, you've got mail. And it's like, whoa,
I know.
no way. And so it kind of feels like this too, and that's sort of how I think people are experiencing things like ChatGPT, where it's like it's doing things that will be almost probably funny to us in a couple years whenever it gets more mature. But right now we're just so impressed by its ability to do things, and you know, like I don't think that it's even been integrated for most of us at all to our daily lives or even our work. And so as we start finding more use cases, we'll start using it for more and more things. But what I believe is that because we're stuck in this mode of thinking of search engines, everybody keeps trying to build a search engine that does something that's not a search engine, like ChatGPT, AI, being able to help you with tasks and ideas. Like a search engine interface is not the right interface for that. It's something different. So I do think that there'll be something that comes along that's probably mundane, that everybody starts using, you know, like AI for a particular use case, and that interface will be the one that ultimately is sort of like dominant. I could see some disruptor coming out of nowhere, some company that is maybe on our radar right now, but that could be another Facebook or Google here in maybe 5 years.
Yeah, and it's like more focused on AI,
Yeah.
or generating AI rather than
Maybe that is open AI. I mean, who knows? But
what I'm curious what you think is going to happen between Microsoft and Google. Like, do you think it's just going to be this like AI war of like who can create the best AI, and like, you know, they're already kind of pushing it out as soon as possible. It's not where they necessarily want it to be, but they want to be the first.
yeah, and you know, maybe it's really hard for me to make predictions and that kind of stuff, because I just think there's a lot of information that we don't know, and it's like when you're talking about global attention and just consumer behavior, it's like there's so many unknowns and variables. It's like, what does a war do to that situation or something like that, you know? And then you've also got to take into account that like Amazon, Facebook, pretty much every major tech company that has any kind of cloud presence has been working on some version of this. Or you take somebody like Cloudflare. Cloudflare might not be building AI, but all the things that the AI is going to have to piggyback off of to basically like excel and run is going to need different technologies. So I think we talked about this in a previous podcast, but it's incredibly computing heavy and resource intensive. That's why most of the APIs have to charge or have a limitation on it right now. And if you look at the image generation stuff, it takes a second.
It does, yeah.
I mean, even at home, I have a 2 gig internet connection. And if I do like computing or something like that for image creation, especially in bulk, it takes a minute.
It reminds me of having dial-up and waiting for something to load. I had dial-up through high school, so like, it just reminds me of, you know, you're waiting for it to load, and then it finally like generates. I think what's so interesting about this is, who knew Microsoft would come back swinging, you know?
Yeah.
I never would have. I was just like, Google is it, you know, it's, you can't catch up to Google. And then Microsoft just comes in with OpenAI and is like, but wait, we're still here. Like, and they're, you know, Bing might be a major competitor again.
Yeah, who would have thought, even inside of Microsoft, having been there and it being an old stomping ground, I can say no one there thought Bing was cool. And like nobody wanted to pretend. Like, you know, it's kind of funny, we would joke around from time to time where Microsoft has a lot of great products, and they work better than pretty much anything else, especially as it relates to software in many cases. But one of the things that I find interesting about it is people would always joke, they'd say, well, if Apple did this, it would be so much cooler.
Yeah.
And it's true. If had Apple been the one that invested in OpenAI and was
Oh
doing
my
a search
gosh.
engine, can you imagine? Google would be like doing, who knows? They'd be like looking for doing a fire sale maybe or something. Who knows?
Yeah,
But
honestly.
but the thing that I think is interesting about both of them and Microsoft kind of like repositioning themselves with this is they did it on the existing Bing brand. I know they just made the investment in OpenAI, but I think it probably would have been better for them to reposition it. And like I was talking about with the user interface, I mean, we could be looking at Microsoft doing a slapdash kind of fast version of implementation, sort of seeing the public's reaction to this ChatGPT thing. And I remember whenever live streaming on your phone was like first kind of coming out, Twitter and a lot of others were basically like racing to get their thing out because this company called Meerkat had come along. And Meerkat was a lot like Periscope where you could just go live on your phone and stream to your friends. And everybody was like, we've got to get out there before Meerkat is like the next big tech company. And of course, they had offers for billions of dollars they didn't sell, and then everybody would just had their native one overnight. I think the fear here with somebody like a Google or a Microsoft is basically the same situation where they're afraid that if they don't get something at least out there for people to start using, that something else will come along and take their lunch.
Yeah, and they'll get left behind. That's kind of it for the topics. You know, I feel like we're going to be talking about AI generated content, Chat GPT, Google's version, like for the next couple weeks. I think when I was looking up things to kind of discuss and what's hot in the news, it's like every website had something about this.
Yeah.
It's a hard not to talk about it.
And it is. And, like you can kind of think of it sort of in the vein of like, on the podcast here, do we talk about the internet? Do we talk about mobile? Well, kind of, like most of the topics are through that lens. And I think that's sort of how this will become, where it's like, it's not even a topic of itself because it's sort of like a whole category of content,
Yeah.
And I think when you look at the direction that the industry is heading, it's really easy to make lots of predictions, and everybody would love to make their predictions and feel like they're smart, myself included. I love to do that. But I think that history has shown us that a fair amount of humility is well respected and rewarded long term when it comes to these types of things, because it is very difficult to understand exactly how things will play out with the way and the nature of something, especially like technology. If we are looking at an internet or an iPhone, the next 5 or 6 years will be filled with like, we didn't see that coming.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a very interesting time. I know personally it's something that like has given me like a new sense of energy around a lot of the things that I work on, because it does feel like we're at the beginning of something. I wasn't quite old enough to really latch onto the beginning of the internet. I was, like a kid, so it's kind of fun. And then mobile, it's like I was a part of it, like growing up. I watched it sort of happen, but I didn't have a chance to kind of like be in on sort of like the whole process of it coming out. So it's fun to be working on this stuff now with with this sort of like era in front of us.
Right. Yeah, I have same kind of timeline. I was pretty young when we first got our first computer, and I didn't have a smartphone till college, and but now I'm like participating in it, like you were saying. I think it's exciting. Well, that's it for I think this episode of the Publisher Lab.
Yeah,
right?
Watch us on YouTube if you're interested in checking out the show there, and you can catch us on podcast platforms everywhere. If you have a chance and you like the show, leave a review. Those things are great. Helps us continue to grow the podcast. That's all we'll ask for. And if you don't like the podcast, just don't leave a review.
There you go. If you don't have something nice to say, don't say it at all.
Yeah.
I believe what we've done, I know I've talked to the person who works on our website. We have created a form at the top of the Publisher Lab website that you can leave, comments that or like suggestions of topics that you want us to talk about. So if you have something that you want us to talk about or suggestions, there should be a little box at the top of the Publisher Lab website, and that will get to us, and then we can look at it and talk about things that you guys are interested in, I know that someone left a comment on YouTube that said it'd be nice if we had a wrap up of like a couple bullet points at the end of the podcast,
Oh, okay.
just like on the YouTube, I'm assuming,
Yeah.
version, just to like wrap up of like key points to take away. So if you
Yeah.
have stuff like that to mention to us, just go there.
Yeah, or tell me that I'm wrong about something.
Yeah.
Yeah, would love to hear it. We'll bring it up. Be your moment.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Won't be the
that's
first
it
time.
for this episode of the Publisher Lab.